After she pays for the trip, I will send her away. But then an incredible twist was revealed. Melanie stood over her kitchen counter, and the weight of the world pressed against her chest like an anvil. Bills were scattered like fallen leaves, each one a reminder of her struggles. 2 jobs, 1 worn-out soul. She was exhausted. She'd been dreaming about the New York writing retreat since the scholarship announcement, thirsting for an escape from her relentless routine of tables and bookshelves. A life driven by survival was the only one she had ever known, but could she actually grasp at something as far-fetched as a writer's dream? The route to this retreat looked impossible. Every dollar counted, every decision felt like a loss. The retreat was an unprecedented opportunity, a moment to embrace her hidden passion, yet the price tag loomed sinisterly. The thought that she might have to forfeit her chance because of money twisted her stomach into knots. Life demanded so much of her every day, and her heart ached for that glimmer of hope painted in brilliant strokes of ink on endless pages. What if this was her chance to be more than just a mother, more than a waitress with dreams? Suddenly, her phone buzzed on the counter, snapping her from her spiraling thoughts. It was a text from her estranged father, the man she'd avoided for years, whose very presence twisted her insides into a storm of resentment. "I'll pay for your trip. You deserve this." A chill shot down her spine, unease racing through her veins. The price of his so-called generosity felt overshadowed by bitter memories of his disregard for her life choices. What did he know about art? To him, it was just a frivolity. Wasn't this just another way to pull her back into his world, a world she was desperate to escape? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Each day at the diner became more fraught after his offer, her thoughts tangled in a web of gratitude and resentment. What if she accepted the money and he used it against her? To him, it would just be proof that pursuing creativity was futile. The tension in her chest was suffocating. She craved approval but loathed the idea of his influence. She could practically feel his scorn for her aspirations. Hadn't he always seen them as a waste of time? Then, amid this whirlwind of anxiety, a flicker of excitement sparked within her. What if the retreat changed everything? What if this was the moment she finally unleashed the stories trapped inside her? But that thought was quickly drowned by fear, the fear of what it would mean to bind her dreams to a man she resented. Would she lose herself completely to his vision? The question clawed at her insides, sending her thoughts racing. As the days slid by, Melanie was trapped between the impending thrill of the retreat and the looming reality of her father's dark shadow. Would she step into a brave new world filled with writers and dreamers, or plunge headfirst into the bitterness of her past? Uncertainty loomed larger than ever, promising the possibility of redemption or the final severing of a relationship never meant to be mended. The silence of her own dreams hung in the air, ripe with unspoken words and the weight of potential. Time was slipping away, she had to choose. But could she really face the man who had always doubted her, or would she walk away from everything she had fought to become, forever haunted by her unmade choices? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows in her small kitchen, Melanie found herself ensconced in a maelstrom of thoughts. The once comforting aroma of simmering pasta felt heavy and stagnant, mingling with the realization of her father's message. She stood rooted to the spot, the phone still warm in her hand, a lifeline she could neither accept nor reject. In this moment of solitude, her internal conflict magnified. The prospect of the retreat shimmered on the horizon. It felt like a beacon of hope in a dreary landscape of routine, yet it was intertwined with the demands of her past. What did it mean to accept help from a man who had turned his back on her dreams? Each day she wore a mask of calm composure at the diner, serving endless cups of coffee and pie, but beneath it all, a storm brewed, a tempest where longing met bitterness. She recalled the many nights spent orchestrating narratives within her mind while navigating the chaos of the dinner rush, the rhythm of clattering dishes choreographed against a backdrop of laughter and complaints. Her dreams were the only sanctuary she had, but could she trade the purity of those aspirations for financial support laced with expectations? She needed to find peace within this turmoil. The next morning brought clarity with the dawn. Eugene, her co-worker, a solid presence with a generous heart, caught her hesitation. "You seem off lately, Mel. What's up?" He prodded gently, wiping his hands on his apron. Her instinct was to shut him out, retreat behind her usual defenses, but something shifted in her, a whisper urging her to be honest. Taking a deep breath, she revealed her father's offer and her looming doubts. As she spoke, the float of the diner faded into the background, and the weight of her decisions hung suspended in the air. Eugene listened closely, his attitude respectful and non-judging, and when she finished, a thoughtful silence engulfed them. "Mel, sometimes you have to accept help, even if it comes from complicated places," he said, his tone reassuring yet firm. "You can't let past grievances dictate your future. That retreat could be what you need to break free. But it has to be on your terms, not his." In that moment, a flicker of realization dawned on her. She understood the import of his words. She had the power to define what acceptance meant. She could reclaim her narrative, fueled by a new sense of resolve. Melanie spent the following weeks weaving her reality into a tapestry of choices. Every morning, she returned home after her shifts to write. Those quiet moments transformed into her escape, where she embraced her vulnerability, penning stories that danced between the lines of her experiences and desires. Each word felt like an act of defiance against the fears that had long held her captive. Meanwhile, she began to research scholarships and additional grants. Rather than feeling suffocated by her father's offer, she pivoted toward independence. She navigated the labyrinth of submission forms and deadlines, discovering grants specifically for women writers, a reality that ignited her determination. With each completed form came a small victory, building her confidence, erasing the grip of the past. Yet with that burgeoning hope came the deeper realization that she was still tethered to unresolved feelings regarding her father. One evening, while typing with abandon, the clarity hit her. Confrontation was not only inevitable, it was necessary. She sat back, fingers hovering over the keyboard, steeling herself for a discussion that had been years in the making. That night, her phone buzzed again, this time with an incoming call from him. The time had come to face the man whose shadows loomed so large in her life. The moment stretched before her, sizzling with potential. Would she accept his offer, but only on her terms? In this electrified silence, she felt her heart race, an undeniable challenge simmering in the air as she took a deep breath and answered. The phone felt like a hot coal against her ear, and for a moment, the world blurred around Melanie. The presumable safety of her written words and newfound ambitions faded as she took a breath, steeling herself for an unavoidable confrontation. "Dad?" she managed, her voice barely breaking through the noise of the diner behind her. "Melanie. I'm so glad you picked up." His tone was cheerful, almost unnerving. How could he sound so light, so free of the burdens lying heavy on her shoulders? "Listen," she interrupted, channeling anger and fear into her words. "Before we get into this, I need you to hear me out completely." A pause filled the silence, pregnant with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. Then, a deep sigh escaped him. "All right, go ahead." Clarifying her feelings was more challenging than any writing prompt she had ever confronted. "I heard your offer about the retreat. You know, I could easily accept it. But I want not blindly. Not until you understand how much it means to me or how much it disrupts what I thought I felt for you all these years." "Mel, I'm trying to help you," he replied, but she heard the edge of defensiveness in his voice, a familiar note she had grown to recognize over the years. "Things have been complicated between us, I get it, but isn't it time to move on?" Her pulse quickened as she processed his words. Move on? He still didn't understand, and perhaps he never would. "You don't get to decide when I should move on. I was left alone with my dreams, with your absence at my most vital moments. I chased them without you. So, if you think that just throwing money at me will solve everything, you're mistaken." Silence enveloped them, charged and tense. For the first time, she could feel the weight shifting her voice, once trembling with uncertainty, now wielded power. "Think about it this way," he offered, his voice losing some of its buoyancy. "I'm extending a branch to help you. You should appreciate that." "Help?" It doesn't feel like that, it sounds more like a transaction. I want to be obliged to your conditions. I have aspirations that mean more than just money. I need your understanding, your support in my journey, not the strings that come attached. She felt herself shaking, emboldened and terrified. This was no longer a battle of discontent, it was her declaration of self-worth. An epiphany crashed over her thoughts. Her existence did not hinge solely on his approval. She was forging her path, her identity, and she had every right to prioritize herself. Melanie, he finally said, his voice softer now, perhaps more vulnerable. But what do you really want? The question caught her off guard, pulling her back from the precipice. She had wrestled with doubt and frustration, but clarity trickled in. I want to take charge of my life. I want to be the author of my own story, not a character in someone else's script. I want my dreams to be fulfilled without conditions. If you're willing to support that, then maybe we can start to mend this, but not as it stands now. She could almost hear the shifting gears in her own mind. The trajectory of her past could no longer dictate her future. Then let us talk about that, he said finally. An opening. Melanie's heart raced. Was he willing to meet her halfway? Maybe, she began tentatively, but only if we address the past first. We can't just ignore what happened, it's a part of me. What are you saying? He asked, confusion creeping back into his voice. I'm saying that we need to confront what drove us apart if we're to have any semblance of a future together, even on professional terms. Let us meet face to face. What about your plans? The retreat? This time, it was her turn to pause. The retreat could open doors, but every door must align with her values. Once I've made a decision, not just reflecting on your wishes, but truly rooted in my desires, I'll consider my next steps. As she hung up the phone, an exhilarating rush coursed through her. This was just the beginning of reclaiming her narrative, and it felt like sky breaking through clouds, but then a question nagged at the edge of her mind. What if his support meant encountering deeper truths that might shatter the fragile framework she was building? With this confrontation looming ahead, Melanie wondered if she was truly ready for all the consequences that awaited her as she dove deeper into this dialogue with her father. Would facing the past shatter her resolve or fortify her determination? In the quiet that followed, she looked out the kitchen window, ready for what lay ahead, but uncertainty mingled with hope. The stakes had never been higher. Each thread of her future was waiting to be woven, but the patterns remained unformed and unpredictable. Would she find the clarity she desperately sought, or would she become ensnared in the very emotions she was attempting to navigate? The days trickled slowly, each moment tinged with a sense of impending change. Reflection had become Melanie's constant companion, prompting her to sift through memories like pages of an old journal. Her conversation with her father echoed in her mind, becoming a mantra of conviction intertwined with doubt. Was it too audacious to seek understanding from someone who had historically shown only fragmented comprehension of her desires? As she transitioned from one day to the next, attending to her work at the library and penning short stories during lunch breaks, each task felt weighed down by anticipation. The retreat loomed across her horizon, a decision previously eclipsed by emotional chaos now glimmering with potential. Yet, the array of truths needing confrontation nestled in her heart like tightly wound springs, ready to unfurl. On one particular afternoon, Melanie slipped into her favorite corner of the library, the scent of aged books a comforting backdrop to her racing thoughts. She settled into her usual chair by the window and opened her notebook, its blank pages mirroring the unknowns that stretched ahead. The pen hovered, and a wave of frustration flooded over her. Sticking to the practicality seemed inadequate. She needed to delve into the emotional landscape that was coloring every decision. She penned a list, things I need to address. Each bullet point felt potent, an accumulation of years spent tiptoeing around her father's expectations. Outdated perspectives on her creativity, misunderstandings about parental roles, and the conditional love that haunted their interactions surfaced before her. Melanie paused at the thought of confronting those issues in person. What if the confrontation reached a boiling point? Could she maintain composure, or would emotion commandeer her resolve? She chewed the end of her pen, closing her eyes to picture the moment vividly, their meeting, faces mere inches apart, expressions raw and charged with decades of feelings. And then it hit her. This encounter meant more than just unraveling the past, it represented an opportunity to redefine boundaries. She envisioned not a confrontation, but a negotiation, a path carved towards understanding where past encounters smushed against her aspirations. The next morning, Melanie took a bold step. She sent an email to her father, outlining a proposed meeting but framing it around shared goals rather than lingering resentment. She urged him to consider not just what he envisioned for her, but also how his support could be better aligned with who she had become. Her fingers trembled as she pressed send, but there was an undeniable thrill of power in the action. Days rolled on, and responses clung in limbo, leaving Melanie caught between hope and apprehension. However, instead of sitting back idly, she dove into preparation. Each detail became a critical brushstroke in the painting of her future. She signed up for a writing workshop to not only hone her skills but to bolster her confidence. The notion of being surrounded by aspiring writers ignited a fire within her. Opportunities awaited beyond her father's shadow. At night, she played with words. Characters she once believed mirrored her struggles began to come alive in fantastical, liberated ways. She explored themes of healing and transparency. Each story crafted felt like peeling back additional layers of fear, diving deeper into her psyche as she penned truth disguised as fiction. But just as she began to feel anchored, another email notification jolted through her. It wasn't from her father but from the writing workshop. They accepted her entry not as a vibrant, hopeful participant but as a featured guest speaker. A swirl of emotions struck her: excitement, pride, uncertainty. A new door had swung open amid existing questions. She was no longer just a dreamer, she had ascended to a position where she was seen as a voice worth listening to. This unexpected turn beckoned her to explore what it meant to amplify her own narrative. As she prepared her speech, wrought with personal anecdotes and the essence of her recent awakening, a gnawing reminder pierced her preoccupied thoughts. A confrontation with her father awaited, and unresolved feelings surged like waves threatening to crash against her polished resolve. Would the vibrant voice she discovered be enough to bridge the chasm in their relationship? Or would her newfound confidence unravel as she stepped onto the edge of their past, teetering on the brink of painful revisits? With every heartbeat echoing her determination, she found herself contemplating the solitary essence of her journey, not just the intricate emotions woven through her history, but the burgeoning opportunities to reshape her story. In the quiet of her room, as she rehearsed her speech, the weight of the moment pressed upon her. She needed to be ready to not only confront her father but also to face herself. Would she fortify her identity, or would old wounds dictate her narrative? She took a deep breath, readying herself for the first confrontation. But as she did, the question loomed darker now. Could she remain true to herself when exposed to the raw emotions that defined their past? The day of the writing workshop crept closer, the weight of anticipation mingling with the reality of her father's uncertain response. Each moment seemed to pulse with a duality, her eagerness to share her voice and the underlying tension of their impending confrontation. Melanie stood before her bathroom mirror, the polished surface reflecting her resolve but also amplifying the tremors of anxiety coiling in her stomach. "Focus on your words," she whispered, trying to bolster her courage. With her speech written, she had poured her heart into every line, yet doubt still whispered insidiously in her mind. As she donned a bright scarf meant to be a symbol of her newfound identity, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was preparing for more than just a workshop. The real test loomed in her confrontation with her father. Each rehearsal sharpened her speech, transforming raw emotions into carefully selected phrases that danced along the edges of vulnerability. But each articulation veered back to the knot of unresolved tension that awaited her. It was almost poetic. As she found her voice in writing, she simultaneously calibrated her approach to face the man who had bequeathed her so many complex feelings. On the day of the workshop, nervous energy ricocheted through her as she paced in the green room, surrounded by other authors about to share their truths. The atmosphere buzzed with enthusiasm, each participant's expectation mirroring her own. She peered through the doorway at the audience, a sea of eager faces igniting a flicker of excitement. They were strangers open to receiving the very essence of her heartfelt stories. When her turn finally arrived, Melanie stepped into the spotlight. The mic felt heavy, a weight she was determined to lift. As she began sharing her journey, it became evident that the act of telling her story was a cathartic release. She spoke of pain, discovery, and ultimately of her blossoming determination to challenge the roots of her self-doubt. The connecting threads of her narratives danced in the air, wrapping the audience in a fabric of shared humanity. Every word she spoke seemed to invite the ghosts of her past, yet she felt buoyed by the presence of those engaged listeners. Their nods and affirmations propelled her forward, resurrecting her belief that narratives could heal. With each passing moment, her former fears unraveled, shifting into a sense of belonging within a community that championed authenticity. But as she exited the stage to a chorus of applause, the external validation and warm reception quickly faded into echoes. Would her father understand her journey or dismiss it as an indulgence? With this newfound recognition, she became acutely aware of the disparity between her internal transformation and her family ties. That night, her father finally responded to her email. His words felt like a cold splash of water, blunt and layered with expectations. He questioned her commitment to their family values while expressing concern that she was pursuing frivolous dreams. The familiar ache of disappointment settled within her. Old patterns had re-emerged, attempting to bind her in place. But this time was different. Her heart thudded with resilience, ignited by her recent experiences. The woman who had addressed a roomful of strangers could not silently shrink back against her father's words. Instead, she planned meticulously, crafting a response that aligned with her values. This was not just a fight for recognition but an essential assertion of her worth. As tears of frustration met determination, the realization hit her with clarity. She needed to confront him, not just for her sake but as a gesture of redefining her identity against his expectations. That anticipation of their meeting morphed into purpose, and she imagined standing before him with the poise she had discovered in sharing her story. As she pressed send on her carefully worded reply, a surge of energy coursed through her veins. What she had once feared transformed into a powerful resolve to redefine their relationship. She would respond to his concerns with her truths and the determination she now harbored. And so, she readied herself, heart racing, as the pivotal moment neared. Would her confrontation bring about a new understanding, or would it intensify the conflict she longed to resolve? In the stillness before action, she wrestled with a profound truth. She was no longer just an eager daughter seeking approval, she was a burgeoning author ready to reclaim her narrative. As she awaited his reply, the cell phone felt like a ticking time bomb in her hands. Could she remain strong in her identity when facing the uncertainty of his reaction? The answer loomed close, yet just out of reach, urging her to step into the storm she had long avoided. Melanie stared at her phone, the silence amplifying the tension in her chest. Minutes elongated into what felt like hours, each passing moment a reminder of the gravity of her impending confrontation. The workshop had buoyed her, yet here she was, teetering on the edge of self-doubt, contemplating the approval of the very person she had sought to untether from her identity. Finally, the device buzzed, pulling her from the depths of her anxious thoughts. She unlocked the screen, and her heart sank as she saw her father's name illuminate the display. Through a haze of rapid breaths, she opened the message, her eyes scanning each word with a mix of trepidation and anticipation. His response was direct, as expected. He expressed a mix of bemusement and resignation, doubting her ability to make a living as a writer while lecturing her about the importance of stability and responsibility. The same old refrain drummed in her ears. It felt as if he was reciting a script handed down through generations. Each sentence cut through her resolve like a knife, feeding the narrative that success could only be measured through conventional paths. Her hands trembled, but beneath the surface, she felt a strengthening swell of defiance. She couldn't allow her father's doubts to smother her new flame. Taking a deep breath, Melanie inhaled the warmth of her recent victory and exhaled the cold grip of expectation. What would she say? How could she convey the importance of her dreams without appearing reckless or dismissive of his values? Melanie reached for a notebook, allowing her thoughts to spill onto the pages as she began to draft a response. Each word struck like a hammer, forging a bridge between her truth and the chasm of misunderstanding that had persisted for so long. She articulated her dreams, showcasing the hard work, sacrifices, and the emotional legacy that had shaped her. As she forged ahead in her message, Melanie felt a flicker of newfound strength. This was not simply a rebuttal but a testament to her growth, the culmination of all the courage she had garnered during those moments on stage. This was her truth, unfiltered and unapologetic, a far cry from the timid girl who danced around her father's heavy expectations. Yet, doubt crept back in, feeding on her fears. Would her words be met with anger or indifference? She wrestled with the weight of uncertainty, the very same specter that had haunted her throughout her life. Just then, a new thought emerged, crystal clear. Whether he understood or accepted her path was irrelevant. What mattered was her acknowledgement of herself, her right to choose her own narrative. The decision was made. She clicked send, liberating the burden of her carefully selected words into the world. A mix of exhilaration and anxiety surged through her as she awaited the fallout. The fragile line she'd been walking for so long had finally snapped, sending her tumbling toward whatever lay ahead. Days passed, each one filled with an undercurrent of tension as she waited for her father's reply. Unable to focus on her ongoing writing projects, Melanie often found herself pulled into a spiral of what-ifs. In the stillness of the night, she penned new ideas, even as doubts about her future ambitions seeped in like autumn chill. She recognized this as a crucial juncture in her journey, a moment intended to test the resilience of her newfound identity. Then, one evening, as she returned home from a cafe, a light from her phone beckoned her like a lighthouse through the fog. Heart pounding, she grabbed the device. A message awaited, but it wasn't her father's name lighting up the screen. It was an email notification from a publishing platform. With bated breath, she opened it, a tremor of hope lacing her veins. Had she allowed her passion to be enough to propel her forward? And just like that, confrontation sparked a revolution within her, one she had only begun to understand. As she scanned through acceptance conditions for her work, exhilaration coiled tightly around her pulse. What she hadn't expected was that embracing her truth would also lead to unanticipated opportunities, altering her trajectory in ways she hadn't imagined. And just as the first inkling of excitement emerged, a separate notification chimed, a reply from her father. Suddenly, she stood once again at the precipice of her transformation, as if the universe was daring her to embrace what lay ahead. Could the confrontation she had dreaded lead to an unexpected connection between them, one transformed by her unapologetic self-awareness? Melanie felt a surge of conflicting emotions as she read and reread the email from the publishing platform. It was a tentative acceptance, contingent on her improving certain aspects of her manuscript. Still, it was a foot in the door, a validation of her efforts. The exhilaration coursing through her veins seemed to straddle both the triumph of progress and the discomfort of knowing there was still work to be done. She scribbled notes in the margins of her acceptance email, her mind racing with ideas on how she could enhance her manuscript, yet, the moment was punctuated by the growing weight of her father's reply. She had been impulsive in sending her message, seeking a reaction or even a connection. But now, standing at the blurred lines between ambition and familial expectation, she felt trapped between two worlds. Each second felt cumulative, a ticking clock amplifying her anxiety. Taking a deep breath, she opened her father's message, heart drumming with every beat. His words were blunt, a reflection of years of conditioning on both sides, the values he instilled in her mingling with the spiraled path she was carving out for herself. He expressed disappointment, not rage. "I thought you were just going through a phase," he had written. "This isn't what a stable future looks like." Melanie tossed her phone onto the couch, her breath hitching. This familiar reprimand was more than just words. It echoed pieces of her past, moments when she would have stammered a weak apology or attempted to convince him otherwise. But now, she felt a deep-rooted determination ignite within her. She was no longer the girl searching for approval, she was a woman choosing her own path. The following days were a whirlwind of revision work on her manuscript, even as her mind oscillated between the thrill of creation and the shadow of her father's skepticism. She willingly embraced the constructive feedback from the publisher, seeing it as a challenge rather than an obstacle. Each line she edited felt like a step further from the confines of expectations, bolstering her confidence. As she prioritized her writing, she encountered unexpected growth. She stumbled upon a hidden talent for narrative depth, developing characters that felt distinctly alive. Her writing was no longer just a reflection of her reality, it was a canvas for her evolving identity. Embracing her truth transported her forward. This was a reclamation not just of her passion but of her essence. Despite the struggle against self-doubt, there were glimpses of clarity in her creative process. Each crafted word became a tool of self-discovery. Discipline replaced her previous hesitance, and the satisfaction of progress lit a quiet fire in her soul. But amid the blossoming of her professional identity, her father's voice still lingered, challenging her resolve. Was she simply postponing a confrontation that needed to be faced? Was she in denial, believing that her awakening to creativity could sever the ties that bound her to an unsatisfying notion of success. Emboldened and yet vulnerable, Melanie turned back to her father's message, her fingers hovering above the screen. What if she could transform this endless cycle of misunderstanding into a dialogue instead? That night, as she penned a thoughtful response, deliberating on the right tone and content, a text notification lit up her phone once more. The sudden chime sent her heart racing. It was from the publishing platform with a follow-up request. A wave of apprehension washed over her. Was it another request for changes, or something more pivotal? In that moment, she stood at a crossroads, balancing the invigorating rush of her writing journey with the looming confrontation with her father. Could this follow-up be the signal she needed to fortify her newfound identity, or would it pull her back into the shadows of doubt? Melanie inhaled deeply, the text from the publishing platform an indecipherable mix of hope and dread. The words seemed to echo in her mind as she replayed the message. They asked for a video call to discuss her manuscript further. It was an invitation she couldn't ignore, yet it also felt like a test she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set the phone down, the weight of anticipation sitting heavily against her chest. She spent the next few hours focusing on revising her manuscript, pouring everything she had into the narrative. But now, the words felt different, infused with urgency and expectation. Each character she breathed life into represented a fragment of her own voice, yet the specter of her father's disappointment loomed over her creations, darkening their vibrant essence. Though she fought against it, a nagging doubt hovered at the periphery of her consciousness. Would he see her work as nothing more than another phase? The following day, as she prepared for the call, Melanie made a small oasis of creativity in her apartment. She cleared the clutter from her desk, arranging her notes and manuscripts with care. This wasn't just about preparing for a professional meeting, it was about creating a space that reflected her dedication. She even lit a candle, feeling the flickering flame symbolize the pathway she was carving. Yet, as she sat in front of her laptop, staring at her reflection, the flicker of unease wouldn't leave her. Doomsday scenarios played out in her mind. What if she stumbled over her words? What if they found her revisions inadequate? What if they wanted to take her story in a direction she wanted to avoid? In the brink of moments, before the meeting began, self-doubt clawed at her confidence, whispering reminders of her father's expectations. Then came the call. She sat up straighter, steeling her resolve as the faces of the publisher appeared on the screen. They greeted her warmly, and their enthusiasm ignited a flicker of excitement within her. The conversation flowed, and they praised her narrative style, particularly the complexity of her characters. Each compliment felt like a salve upon her insecurities, reigniting the flame that had dimmed under her father's shadow. But as the conversation shifted towards their suggestions for revision, Melanie felt a familiar tightening in her throat. They suggested adjusting certain plot points to make her story more commercially viable. Her instincts recoiled at the idea. "I wanted to speak my truth," she blurted out before she could fully process the implication of her words. Behind the screen, the publisher paused, their expressions shifting from consideration to intrigue. "That's essential," one remarked, "but remember to balance personal truth with marketability. It's a tightrope walk." That insight ricocheted in her mind. It illustrated the boundary she treaded. Personal expression against commercial expectation. How could she adhere to her voice while accommodating their vision? After the call ended, Melanie sat in stillness, her heart racing. The meeting had left her exhilarated, yet there was a burgeoning conflict within her. She couldn't help but wonder, if she strayed too far from their guidance, would she risk losing her opportunity? That night, as she revisited her father's email for the 100th time, filling the margins with reflections, a thought began to take shape. Instead of merely providing an explanation for her passion, could she offer a bridge of understanding? A plan began formulating in her mind, a way to carve out her place in both her creative world and her family, but would she dare to reach out again? And if she did, could she stand firm in her truth without alienating him further? The prospect infused her with both fear and resolve. Unbeknownst to her, these new challenges were only the beginning. Decision made, she began typing a message to her father, heart pounding as she struggled to articulate her feelings while preserving her integrity. The glowing screen awaited her words, but could she truly convey the complexities of her evolving journey without losing her father's respect? As she clicked send, Melanie took a breath, knowing the next chapter of her life was unfolding before her eyes, fraught with challenges both personal and professional. How would her father respond, and more importantly, how would she navigate the impending storm? The moment the message left her fingertips, Melanie's heart raced as if it had taken a life of its own. Her thoughts spiraled around the possible responses, each scenario more daunting than the last. Would her father understand? Would he dismiss her efforts as frivolous? She forced herself to stand and pace, each step threading her anxiety into the fabric of her determination. The hours dragged into a disquieting silence until her phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen, and her breath caught. It was her father. She hesitated before opening it, bracing herself for the anticipated disappointment. But the message was brief: "Let us talk." No elaborate explanations, no waiting for her to find her voice. Just an invitation to a conversation. Melanie stared at the words, her heart pounding. Could she reveal everything she had poured into her work? The truth, her passion for storytelling, how it formed the backbone of her identity, was akin to exposing raw flesh to a world that had often felt hostile. Yet, she clung to the idea of the bridge she yearned to build. With newfound resilience surging through her, she agreed to meet. Her mind raced with what she wanted to say as she prepared herself for the impending confrontation. The next day, she arrived early to their usual cafe, a small, local spot where the smells of brewed coffee and baked goods enveloped her in familiarity. She found a corner table, drawing comfort from the atmosphere. This was her domain, her comfort zone, yet it felt like a stage. As she waited, her thoughts turned back to the feedback from the publisher, echoing their insistence on balancing authenticity with marketability. When her father arrived, he looked just as he always had, composed, wearing his usual pressed shirt and unyielding demeanor. But today, there was an undercurrent of weariness about him, a hint that he, too, was navigating a difficult path. "Melanie," he greeted, settling into the chair opposite. "Dad," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. They exchanged pleasantries, small talk that illuminated the chasm between them. Finally, she dove into it, laying bare her thoughts about her writing, her ambitions, her struggles to maintain her truth against the storm of expectations. The words flowed with urgency, fueled by an unquenchable desire for connection. As she spoke about her characters and the emotions they encapsulated, seeing her father's brow furrow, she feared he was slipping further away. Yet, it seemed every word was gradually shifting his perspective. She sensed he was beginning to listen not just with his ears, but with a genuine heart. "I want you to be successful," he said finally, his tone softer, less authoritative. "But what does success mean to you? Is storytelling where you see that success?" She faltered slightly. This was the moment she had both anticipated and dreaded, the moment where she could either reinforce his fears or foster new understanding. "It's everything, Dad. For me, it's not just about sales or recognition. It's a way to connect, to make sense of the world. Writing is where I feel truly alive." The silence stretched between them, a reflective pause, perhaps an acknowledgement of her honesty. But then, he sighed heavily, a weight resting on his shoulders. "I always thought I was guiding you toward stability," he confessed. "I didn't realize that my expectations were stifling you." In that moment of vulnerability, Melanie felt a shift. They were both standing on the precipice of an uncharted territory. What had once felt like a battle was evolving into an exploration, a cooperative pathway towards understanding. "I guess we're both learning," she said, her voice gaining strength. "This is a journey for both of us." Her father nodded slowly, recognition dawning in his eyes. The walls had begun to crack. Yet, as they both realized the potential for mutual growth, the call from the publisher flashed back into her mind, the persistent reminder that she still needed to navigate her ambitions within the confines of commercial reality. Would she end up compromising her artistry in the name of success? The question lingered like a specter, overshadowing the blossoming connection with her father. In that moment, a new plan hatched in her mind, a synthesis of her father's guidance and her artistic vision. She would not just strive to submit to market demands or familial expectations. She would create a hybrid. Her narrative could weave together the threads of authenticity and commercial viability, but how? And so, As the conversation opened up paths that seemed previously closed, the moments slipped away, and she realized that she stood on the brink of a decision far more significant than she'd anticipated. How would she articulate her newfound strategy to the publisher while still holding fast to her truths? In this delicate dance of creation and perception, Melanie faced her greatest challenge yet, to carve out not only her voice but her very identity within an industry that often sought to mold her in a predetermined shape. Would she be able to step fully into this emerging vision, or would fear hold her back just as her father's expectations had? As she stared into her father's eyes, the question loomed larger than before. The journey had only just begun. As the weeks unfolded, Melanie experienced a seismic shift within herself. The conversation with her father had ignited a sense of hope, a flicker of understanding that began to redefine both their relationship and her ambitions. Instead of feeling the weight of her past, she found herself transforming that burden into a platform from which she could launch into her future, soaring closer to the dreams she once thought were unattainable. No longer submerged in self-doubt, she channeled her energy toward crafting a manuscript that resonated with her authentic voice. Each page was infused with the intricacies of her journey, a harmonious blend of raw emotion and professional aspirations. She meticulously implemented the feedback from the publisher while steadfastly maintaining her creative vision, navigating that delicate tightrope of marketability versus authenticity. Within her small but cozy workspace, a palpable energy arose as she dedicated countless hours refining her work. She developed characters that screamed of personal truth, and plots that mirrored her struggle while exuding purpose. Every word she typed felt like a declaration of her identity, and with each passing draft, she summoned the courage to claim the title of writer not just from her dreams, but from the very fabric of her reality. Simultaneously, her bonds with her father evolved. Following their heartfelt dusk meeting, they established a tentative truce that bore the potential for collaboration. Their conversations shifted from accusations and misunderstandings to a nurturing dialogue that enabled them to explore their respective roles in each other's lives. She sensed a newfound respect blooming where once there was dismissal. He began asking questions about her writing process and even offered gentle suggestions, which she received with an open heart. One afternoon, Melanie received an unexpected email from the publisher, informing her that they would indeed like to move forward with her manuscript. Specific aspects of her narrative used her vivid insight into her life and ambitions, a signal that her hard work had paid off. As she read the email, disbelief washed over her. With shaking hands, she reread the words. They were interested in publishing her book. This was no ordinary moment, it was the culmination of her journey, a testament to her growth in reclaiming her narrative, her triumph. Yet, with this monumental achievement came the essential step of acknowledging the journey that led her here. She understood she needed to share this news with her father. The audience for her success was not merely external, he was vital in the tapestry of her life's narrative. That evening, Melanie invited him to dinner, her excitement mingled with anticipation. Over pasta and a garnished salad, she saw the flicker of concern in his eyes, which swiftly transformed into pride as she shared her success. Each detail about the manuscript's acceptance flowed effortlessly from her mouth, the themes, the depth of her experiences that imbued her voice with resonance over the written word. Recognizing the significance of the moment, she gestured to him. "Dad, this journey isn't just about me. It's about us, it's about our healing." His gaze intensified, filled with a mix of admiration and realization. "You've always had it in you," he replied, a weighty sincerity in his tone. "I was too blind to see it." As their conversation deepened, Melanie realized she no longer sought validation from him in the same desperate manner. Being able to demonstrate her worth not only solidified her identity but bridged the gap between them. They were forging a new path together, rippled with understanding, honesty, and, ultimately, acceptance. Months later, as she held her published book in her hands, the weight of her journey crystallized into tangible reality. The cover, adorned with her name, symbolized everything she had conquered: the fears, the uncertainties, and the long-desired recognition of herself as an accomplished author. In the glow of that moment, Melanie finally breathed freely. She had carved out a new reality, reshaped not by others' expectations but by her own dreams and efforts. The irrevocability of her transformation permeated every fiber of her being, and as she left her old constraints behind, a deep sense of fulfillment enveloped her spirit. Melanie emerged not just successful, but an embodiment of resolved grace. And with this new chapter, she vowed to be the guiding light for those around her, to inspire them by showing what it meant to chase dreams with tenacity, authenticity, and heart. Now, I invite you to make a commitment to yourself. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm because your support matters. Comment your reactions and theories about this journey and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share, because the power of storytelling can ignite change and you have the power to spread it.